We're moving on to our next panel discussion now. We're talking about leveraging DEI for customer engagement and brand building. And I would like to invite on stage the moderator first, Vani Gupta, Dandia, marketing consultant.
Thank you so much all for being here. We have a very interesting topic, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion with respect to marketing. Now, there's been plenty done and said on this subject, but I'm hoping with this diverse panel that we have over here, we'd be able to bring some new perspectives to you. So let's start with what do each one of you do with regard to DEI? Does it even matter for your respective brands? And what do you do? Let's start with stories on what do you do and why does it matter? Raj, would you like to start?
So for us, DEI comes naturally because we are from the fashion industry. And we take DEI the same way Abraham Maslow took it.
Actually, I don't think fashion and DEI goes
goes
very well with DEI. I mean, because I feel fashion is all about very, very, very pretty women.
No.
Fashion is about unachievable proportions. Fashion is about absolutely, what do you call that? Porcelain glass skin. And six packs, exactly. So where does DEI figure in fashion?
That used to be the case long time back. Now you have plus size models campaigning for Calvin Klein, for Victoria's Secret, right? Back in the day, Victoria's Secret had angels. Now it has body positivity and different skincare ambassadors. Priyanka Chopra is one of them, right? If we come to India, we see Lakme. The ramp of Lakme is being walked by different individuals. Some of them are trans, some of them are body positivity ambassadors. Some of them belong to different sects. So it is all changing, and the thing is, if you change, the world changes with you, and so does your consumers. And fashion is all about consumption and advertisement. That's it, which is why we call it the luxury industry, right? And the way we take it at Fashion Entrepreneur Fund, at India Fashion Awards, when we understood we need to be more inclusive, we ran the campaign for IFA in which we advertise that you can nominate yourself or people you know for the Fashion Awards. And this entire campaign was called Nominate Yourself. In this, we witnessed nominations, self-nominations from individuals to the level of Bibu Mohapatra, who's in New York, by the way. And he's a very famous designer. He himself nominated him. And then we have different individuals from the streets of Chennai, to Kolkata, to Mumbai, and that is how we understood, okay, that's the spirit of fashion, which is why our motto in India Fashion Awards is celebrating the spirit of fashion in you. Because ultimately it's subjective, and we go through subjective, right?
And the problem is that the large number of buyers, unfortunately, don't have the perfect bodies which you usually see on stage. So if fashion has to make money, then fashion has to sell to the likes of us who are fat and ugly. So there is no choice but to make sure that there is adequate DEI in fashion, isn't it?
But then again, you said it yourself, ugly. What is ugly? What is beautiful? It's all relative, isn't it?
So I just Googled, how has Barbie changed? And this is what Google says, okay? The first two words, it says, yes, plump. Barbie's got a new body, 3 new bodies actually, petite, tall, and curvy. So, so even Barbie isn't Barbie anymore. Barbie is, well, Barbie is still apparently Barbie, but yes, Barbie can also be plump.
No, because now it comes in relatable packages. Sometimes
Barbie comes in different packages, yes. So, Raj, now that we are talking about fashion, why don't you tell us about that story of raw mango that we were discussing earlier?
Oh yes, specially quoted as ugly by you, right? So what Raw Mango did, Raw Mango created a campaign for 6 months in which they got their consumers, they got their customers to shoot for them. They went into their houses, made them dress up in their clothes, no makeup, no backdrop, nothing, raw as usual, which you and I are, right? Because we're the consumers. We don't have that many touch-ups, we don't have a professional backdrop, we don't have the lights. We pick those clothes up, we wear them and we roam around. That's what Raw Mango understood, because ultimately, if the consumer cannot relate to your product does not sell. The same way Dove did it, right? You were beautiful, that entire tree Dove used to have. The same thing Raw Mango did, and for 6 months, their consumers were on their social media handles and advertisements, which was brilliant because ultimately each consumer and customer thought of two things. One, I could be featured in their campaign because everyone wants validation. That's the truth of life. That's the truth of marketing, isn't it? Right. Second thing, they could relate. I cannot relate to the person in 6 packs wearing that turtleneck. I'm not that. I'm a bit bulky. But I can relate to another bulky man wearing the same stuff because I know, acha, isse to thoda theek hum dikh jayenge. That's what we all go through, isn't it?
Neelima, would you like to give it a shot at how DEI is relevant for your brand? Talk about your brand first, let everybody know what you do, and then talk about how it is relevant for you.
So interestingly, when we talk fashion, we talk women. You want to take my mic? So interestingly, when we talk fashion, we talk women. That itself is is a problem because fashion is not about women, it's for everyone. At Luminous, while we talk about inverters, batteries, solar, again, people say it's a male industry, male purchase, male category. So where is DEI in that? Now, this is where the major conversation comes in. What is brand? Brand is about building business. Brands were built to make business last longer or for business longevity. So when you build a brand which should last test of time, it should also have all the DEI elements included into it. And DEI to me, honestly, Vani, is not about including women into your advertising or getting women consumers also to buy you for a category which is not purchased by them directly but influenced by them probably. So I would say at Luminous what we do is we talk about DEI in 4 directions. One is consumer, which is a community, which is direct purchase and indirect influence. But then second is our customers, which is our distributor. A lot of example we have is where we are encouraging how there are people, women background coming into retail to actually retail these kind of product, which makes it more a different conversation. I was into a sales and marketing conference and I saw there was more than 6 women retailers participating into it. And that was the sight to see because that then brings and breaks the mold towards a male-dominated category. Number 3 is innovation. Innovation, what we do today, when we think about it's only male category, male domination, male, how do you build it? But I have seen the change happening when your CEO itself changes and becomes the women, right? So now this is the industry first move wherein in this kind of industry, which is more industrial, you have a women CEO, which changes the dynamics in terms of innovation, in terms of thinking, in terms of bringing diversity into conversation. And we launched STEM program, which is about science, technology, engineering, and maths. And we said that let's talk about the program which can actually bring more and more engineers, more and more R&D, more and more manufacturing in the field of technology and bring women forefront. And we launched a campaign actually during Women's Day. That was Women in Energy campaign. I don't know how many of you would have seen, where we said that it is about bringing them to the forefront to having conversations towards technology, shaping manufacturing and diversity towards that. Of course, there are various programs on DEI happens because the 4th dimension is employer, wherein you make inclusive decision-making, inclusive discussions. So it's a vast field. To me, brand building cannot be concluded without these 4 dimensions of brand, and wherein DEI actually sits at the center of conversations towards business, towards brand, towards distribution, towards consumer, and towards innovation.
So, you talked about the brand being designed for different kinds of consumers and the fact that women are influencers, Neelima. I also found this interesting statistic. I'm sure this is widely known that most cars still are only designed for male bodies. cars are still, even this day and age, are not adequately designed for women's bodies. And one would think now, in this age, that would have changed. But apparently that is not so, because obviously the ones who are actually making the cars, the ones who are testing cars, are predominantly men, which is why cars are designed for men. So coming to you, Mukesh, would you like to tell us a little about how, so Mukesh, one of Mukesh's biggest brands is an olive oil brand called
Yes,
Olive.
Yeah.
Am I right about that?
Yes.
So tell us how DEI is relevant to you, or what is it that you do to make it an advantage?
Sure. Thanks, Vani, for that question. So, as a food FMCG player, I would say when I heard the term inclusive marketing, I said this term doesn't exist for us as an industry or as a brand. What I mean by that is that inclusive marketing is not a separate marketing strategy for us. It's the way of our how the default marketing works for us. Oil is consumed in India in every household. Every individual consumes oil. So clearly the representation of marketing in our advertising, in our communication, the representation of people has to be from the diverse set of people belonging to different region, gender, age group, socioeconomic strata. It has to be there. I mean, it's non-negotiable. You cannot deny that. So DEI as a topic or as a principles, I would say fall very naturally, fit very naturally into our brand strategy or our brand ecosystem of the content that we create. Now, typically, a couple of steps that we take is that when I'm doing a brand campaign, I'll not have a single language campaign across the pan-India network. And I think that's the basic, foundational principle that a lot of FMCG players have, that because I'll not run a Hindi language or English language campaign in a Telugu market, because these people have a lot of cultural sensibilities. So maybe I'll have my campaign in 6 to 7 languages, where I have my market. It would be Gujarati, Bengali. So all those regional languages are being taken care of. Even in terms of representation, now because these principles are very, very, very touchy topics, the brands are more transparent these days. In the information age, the consumer is extremely aware. We take very, very focused, so to say, a nuance in terms of how we're representing the women in our communication. We don't want to stereotypes that woman is shown in the kitchen and the husband is shown in the office. Those kind of stereotypes we're trying to break in the kind of TVC or the communication we're trying to create. We work with a lot of influencer marketing, and I think Raj was touching upon that. Influencer marketing, why this entire influencer marketing became so successful is just because of the fact, because there are people you can relate to it. If I would have one celebrity talking about a cooking oil, I'll say, okay, maybe this will not work for me because I don't have that kind of lifestyle. But when I see a Rohan, a Rahman, or a Raina, or Sinha using those products, I feel, okay, this lifestyle is something that I can afford, or I'm having, I can relate to it. So hence this product will also work for me. So that is the reason why influencer marketing worked for us. And in our influencer marketing, we take very particular conscious choice to represent all language, all cultural or regional, the women as well as the male in the representation. So that's a couple of 2-3 points we take deeply care of, not to hurt any cultural sensibilities as well. And as I said, because it comes very naturally to us, we have been doing this for many years. It's not something that we have started doing in last couple of years. It comes very naturally and organic to us.
So one of the things that I have seen in my own career is that, a lot of the agencies, the partners that we work with are not necessarily, the right bunch or the right mix of people. It's not just in our own offices. It's not just our team makeup, but also the makeup of all the partners that go towards building that brand. And that gets reflected. The lack of DEI or the lack of diversity in teams gets reflected in what you put out as a brand, not just in terms of communication, like I was just reading, even in terms of the product design. So I'll give you a little anecdote from my own days at Kurkure. There was a time, and it's not a blanket statement, it's not as though we didn't ever have women, but there was a time when in the agency there were predominantly men. We had a CSD who was a guy, And we did do some fascinating creatives. We did do a lot of good work. But there were occasions when I felt I was the only woman in the room. I had a bunch of brand managers, all men. I had a boss who was a guy. I had the CEO who was a man. And I had the agency, which were all men. And scripts were being discussed in the room where there was this little nuance of a gharwala, you know, a landlord asking a woman for the gharwala. Now, without going into the details of what the story was, I found it extremely offensive, you know, as a single woman in the room as to why should the gharwala have to be called to make decisions. I mean, does this woman not have adequate brains to be able to make a decision by herself? Why does she need the approval of the gharwala? And who is the gharwala, you know? So some things like these, you can't pull out the oddity of it unless you have a diverse team. Like if I want a voice on the table, that script would have gone through and it would have been made exactly as it were first presented. So I think a lot of what we think, at one time DEI was considered a nice to have. You must have, you know, a team that is made up of diverse people because it's the right thing to do, but it has real implications on business. But since I'm on this, which is this little bit about, sometimes you mentioned this term, virtue signaling. You know, you see a lot of brands on Instagram. Sometimes I'm wondering, why is everybody on this feed, why is everybody looking plus size? You know, why is everybody looking dark? Or why it seems like they've consciously picked up a lot of models with skin problems. Now, I think there is a problem there as well. It's not, sometimes brands tend to go the other way. So talk to us a little about this, Raj, this bit about virtue signaling.
When I say virtue signaling, the first thing I can think of is a brand present in a first world or a second world country advertising that we should be just, we should be right, and we should be sustainable, while at the same time they have sweatshops in Bangladesh, Vietnam. Many of the clothing brands, they have 14-year-old, 9-year-old kids working in small labor camps in Dhaka, exporting it all. And in Spain, the people who are wearing it are using the right hashtags about equality. That's not how it should go. Is the equality not there for those kids in Dhaka? Why? Because they're brown, or because they belong to a third world country, or they're not rich enough. At the same time, if you see it like that, one way you have a clothing label promoting plus size people, promoting dark skinned people, promoting different races, different variations of individuals. At the same time, that very label is producing a large amount of waste, which we regularly face with fast fashion, right? So ultimately, because of this DEI marketing, the brands sometimes confuse with everything woke, with wokeism, and they misinterpret the real message, which is in the crux of it, right? They highlight more on what should be done rather than what they actually are doing, because at the end of the day, your consumer is not a fool. One way or the other, when he or she is associating themselves to the brand, they think about it, they read about it. The better interpretation of this would be the way Dove did it. Now, Dove also used body positivity. Dove also marketed different racial people, different racial differences, right? They had the black models, they have the white models, they have the brown models, they have the obese, healthy individuals, while at the same time, they had the thinner variations of people. But their motto was not that it is all okay. Their motto was every skin is beautiful, everyone is beautiful. It's not about you or me. Regular does not need to be ugly. Regular can be beautiful as well, because at the end of the day, we're all consumers, right?
So, you know, another story that I'm reminded of, I worked with a woman entrepreneur on feminine hygiene products. And we were talking about sanitary napkins and period underwear. Do you know, most of the period brands are headed by men, even in the D2C world. And a lot of the brands, the big brands that we see, are also predominantly men, which is why a lot of the kind of advertising you see, a lot of the kind of products that we see, what we women use are not necessarily comfortable for us. And we used to have this joke even in Unilever. Bulk of Unilever's consumers, and this is true for most FMCG companies, are all women. But that is not what you see, in the offices, certainly not in the sales team, certainly not on the shop floor, certainly not. It's changing. Yes, it is changing. And everybody is becoming more aware of it. And of course, there is a broader issue, which is that you don't have as many women applying for jobs as well. That too has to change. Plus, women drop off after maternity, etc. But the point being made is that products that are made and sold by men can't adequately speak to a woman's needs. Because unless you've used it and unless you know how to relate with it, it's difficult. With whatever number of consumer interviews you do, you have to try the product yourself. In many ways, the brand manager is supposed to be an embodiment of that brand also.
Can I?
Yes, please.
Half of your designer garments are produced by gay guys.
Sorry, say that again?
Half of your designers, they're men. Though they have a different sexual preference, but they're men. Who is their largest consumer base? Who wears their outfits? So you're right, of course, but to a point. Right. Because at the end, those are also men. वो टेलर भी एक आदमी है, वो डिज़ाइनर भी एक आदमी है, बेचने वाला भी एक आदमी है, बट कंज्यूमर आपकी वहाँ पे भी एक फीमेल है who actually loves it. Right. So this thing itself is very subjective and dynamic from industry to industry and region to region.
Ultimately, it's all about, are you able to understand whom are you selling and is it relevant to them or not? And this relevance is a big thing, because when we say brands are built to last test of time, if they are relevant. So this reminds me one story from my side also. We were designing, I was thinking about one of my past experiences about refrigerator, and most of the tech, durable, R&D, these functions and companies are led by men. And when you're designing refrigerator is not just about cooling, technology, digital, UI, user interface. It's also about space. How much space and what is the space management around it? And left to just one way of thinking, you would just design space which is very much 3 shelf, and then there is 40% going into freezer, and then 60% remaining into vegetable area, whereas majority of the usage is vegetable area and less of this. But with the changes in the organization, and you rightly said, a lot of things are changing. There are people bringing in different kind of people, different gender, different young and new segments also coming in at the same time to design the product. Today, if you look at the refrigerator market, you will find 30% freezer and 70% refrigerator. Within that also understanding, there is lipstick area, there is curd making area. So these are all coming in because there is diversity and inclusion in actually designing technology which can make life better for anyone.
So I want to shift the focus of the discussion a little from one is DEI, we've talked a lot about representation of women, but the other is also just, because we're all marketing, is also the representation of other functions and making, because delivering to the consumer or making the organization a consumer first organization, that isn't the prerogative or the responsibility of the marketing department alone. That must sit with the entire organization. And very often I found that actually the best ideas, even for innovation, the best product ideas, the best marketing ideas also come from departments outside of marketing. How many of us even feel open enough and secure enough to be able to welcome that kind of thinking? Would any of you like to share anecdotes on that?
So yes, I mean, you're extremely right. So sometimes as a marketer, we also take this as a pain point, because there's an internal joke with us that everyone knows about marketing more than the marketers do. Everyone has a point of view that your TVC should look like this or your communication should look like this. But yes, having said that, what we have done is that obviously you cannot have pretty much the entire 200 people in your organization contribute to your idea. There is obviously a representation from each department, which you have maybe a a sounding board. You can use it as a sounding board. So while the core idea or the ideation will be done by the marketing team, but that also goes through those different supply chain, those kind of different department heads. And sometimes in those meetings, and you have that regular rhythm to these meetings, and sometimes a good idea can actually come from those people because maybe sometimes the salespeople work more closer to the consumer, and maybe what we as a marketer sometimes fail or like that, maybe we are largely discussing with our advertising and media agency, we do not or sometimes lack that connect with the consumers. The sales guy who's talking to a retailer, who's talking to a distributor can have various interesting insights. And sometimes they will come across those insights, and then the marketer can take from there and weave that story around those insights. But yes, that's very important to have those insights at least on the table, and that's where the inclusivity comes into the picture, that even in your organization, if you have a seat for your sales or distribution supply chain team to have a say in your marketing communication.
Thank you for that, Mukesh.
You know what, and I agree with Mukesh, but I was also thinking that marketing takes too much of burden about brand, right? Because they feel that they are the owners of the brand, but brand is business. It's, right, it's because of brand the business is running. So I personally feel that, marketing, brand is too important an asset to be left to a function, which is only marketing. To me, the brand is with the customers, with your own employees, with your consumers, and then there are many other things which is happening in your stakeholders and shareholder world where your brand image and reputation is also getting created. So a lot of time, different functions and their inclusion into the brand has always added a lot of value, depending on what programs, what kind of forums have we created actually to feed inputs, not just casually, but more formally to actually make those changes into the brand. I have one example. We were doing recently IPL. So Luminous was the front principal sponsor for Rajasthan Royals. And while marketing team was thinking, we will do this, we will do TV, we will do this, social media. I mean, that's what marketing would think about. How do you make the brand look best in the media? But then sales was thinking about how do I get the revenues and how do I get the dealers and distributors more committed towards the business during the season time. Service was thinking about what do I do during this time when the brand is maximum visible. Sales would want to push more and there will be more number of service calls, right? So now the same thing, and they also went into preparation. And HR was thinking about how do I get the entire organization rally towards brand being visible within the organization during that time, right from plant to manufacturing to supply chain to logistics. Everyone was that how do I make them look brand luminous?
Neelima, you've certainly won a lot of brownie points within the organization. I hope
Yes.
your CEO gets to hear this.
I handle only transformation. Marketing is handled by many other people. But look, this is what is to me transforming brands and business, wherein you bring diverse function experiences into just making one campaign, which is IPL, which is front-end campaign. And I can understand Vani with Pepsi, so many campaigns on cricket, but look at the rallying around, which happens around that one campaign. That is to me the true example of DEI, wherein everyone comes together to just make it.
Do we have any questions from the audience? We have about 10, 12 minutes. Yes, please. Do you want to take my mic? Or maybe you can just stand up and ask your question. I'm sure we'll be able to.
Thank you for the wonderful discussion panel. It's audible? Yeah. We can hear you. Yeah, quite interesting, I would say. Vani, in fact, full points to you as a moderator. In fact, sometimes I felt that you are a panelist and not a moderator. Question to you, Vani, because having spent about 36 years into the marketing world, both in this country and overseas, I'm a bit confused with this discussion because what seemed to be happening or where the direction in which we are going is that DEI seemed to be focused only in a male-female divide. which you will agree as a marketer is not the case. I don't think anybody in this room knows automobiles better than I do, because I spent 20 years in the international automobile field before I came here back to India.
Ah, okay.
So therefore, what I would say is, when I would just like to answer a small question that you had talked about designing cars, keeping in mind both the man and the woman's body. You see, what happens is, when you are, who drives? It's a question of driving a car. The question is that the driver, whether it's a male, female, or somebody in between, needs to be comfortable and be able to reach out the controls properly. In the modern technology that you have, in any car worth its name, the seats and the control panels are entirely and wholly adjustable to the requirements of a driver. So the question, and so much so, I don't know whether that technology has come into this country or not, but the better cars in the Middle East and abroad have got a heating system in the seats, where when in those days where the lady needs a bit of heating, that's what is available to her. Even in a place like Middle East, where it is scorching heat all around, you have the air conditioner running in the car, but you also have heated seats so that the lady is comfortable. So therefore, I do not think that I would fully agree with a comment that...
I'm so glad to hear that. I'm so glad. I'm sure you're absolutely right. But the broader point being made was, without any offense to the entire auto industry, I hope the entire auto industry doesn't come after me, but I was just reading off what I saw from the net, and from my own experience, I have some friends who are fairly short, and a lot of times, in fact, even with me, I find that it's not always very easy to reach
I would like to
the
compete with you as far as
accelerator
height is
and the brake.
concerned.
Point well taken.
Okay.
So I have driven every car under the sun, from a Ford to a Ferrari. That's what we were dealing with there.
I'm so glad
Without
that
any
this
problems,
discussion
right.
has sparked off this. If we can make an iota of a change in the auto industry because of this little
No,
discussion
it
we're
has been
having.
there for quite some time. In fact, you know what actually makes me sad, I won't say irritated because that would be a rather strong word, is that when people write articles, they write it with a very myopic point of view. They don't do a research properly. So whoever has written the article, because of which led you to say that, whoever
I
it
read
is,
off the Guardian.
whoever it is, I really don't
90%
know,
of the
but
time, the Guardian doesn't properly research. They add an article on veganism. By the way, being vegan gets the carbon footprint higher, not lower, because you have the mass-produced livestock.
Okay, I think we must salvage this discussion.
You will
It's
get
very-
the Guardian out, following you. That why did you take that name?
No,
I thought you were going to talk about DEI being more than just men and women, and
Yeah, I
till
am,
there
yes.
I certainly agree with you.
Yeah.
I think the cars discussion we should keep aside,
Absolutely.
because it's you and I should have a discussion outside the room specifically on the auto industry.
No, as a marketer
She's
again,
threatening you.
as a marketer
Meet her
again,
outside.
as a marketer again, I'll come back to some broader aspects where
Yes.
me and my wife use things in our daily lives. So there is an aspect which is called social listening, or for that matter, consumer listening.
Right.
Consumer listening has now transformed to social listening, because we have the internet world which has come on board. It has always been there in the form of actually panels which observe people's behavior and so on and so forth. It is nothing new, right? The only thing is the medium has changed from a physical to a social, to an electronic medium. Now, how does any company decide on what is going to be a product design? They go in for extensive research on how exactly should be built so that the customer buys it. Now, if I am a fridge manufacturer, a refrigerator manufacturer, I have to be absolutely out of my senses in case I do not make a design which is going to be appealing to the
Agree with
Therefore,
you.
anybody who says that they have not been taken into account is wrong. And the other thing is that I do not find it of much significance, I won't say any, that the lady or a man is there in running a particular department, or it is a skill that you are running. So therefore, any marketer worth his salt cannot put his or her personal views alone in the decision making. It has to be an outcome of research. It has to be outcome of a scientific process.
Oh,
As you
100%
said,
agree with you.
as you
100%
said,
agree with you.
the whole
I mean,
problem
one
is-
would argue by exactly your
No,
logic that you
Vani, the
can't be
whole-
a dog in order to be, to produce products for a pet. But the larger point being made, while I completely agree with you, I mean, of course, you know, the larger point being made was, yes, you've got to understand the consumer's requirements. You must understand the consumer, their relationship with the product category. You must understand the insights relevant to that product. You must understand all of that. So in fact, in levers, for example, we used to have a rule that if you joined a brand new, then you couldn't speak in meetings unless you've done 100 hours of consumer work. Unless you've understood the consumer and you know the consumer's life in and out, which we considered equivalent to 100 hours of consumer work, you're not allowed to speak in meetings, was the rule at my time. So I 100% agree with you. But the point being made at large was that by and large, if the brand custodians, if the company custodians haven't used the product or are not very close to the product category, like in this case, a refrigerator, which, you know, a refrigerator company which is entirely men will never understand unless they do the kind of consumer research that in the puristic sense that you're talking about should be done. What we're saying is perhaps it still isn't. Perhaps a lot of what the dominant understanding or the dominant obsession in the organization might be gets reflected in the product. Like Neelima was saying, it's true. How many men would know, you know, even in this room, that a lot of us women also keep lipsticks in the fridge? That which brand of fridges today has made a separate compartment for cosmetics? Not one brand today of fridges has done that. Because in the Delhi summer, you need to keep your lipsticks in the fridge.
Samsung has.
Yeah, just maybe adding a
Samsung
point to
has.
it.
Samsung has.
Bosch.
LG
I'm
has.
a huge fan of Samsung.
Now LG has,
Yeah.
Samsung has.
So the
And Bosch has
you know,
as well.
guys, the point being made is that today there still is adequate ground to cover on DEI. That I think nobody in this room would disagree with. That there isn't adequate ground still to cover in DEI.
And
Like-
of course,
like all-
DEI is not about gender, and that's what I was
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
DEI,
That's what I'm trying to say.
So that's what we said, we were discussing, that DEI is about employers, it's about customers, it's about consumers, community, innovations, and then there is gender, then he talked about regional, then there is languages. There are many aspects of it. And ultimately, it's about staying relevant to the consumer. A brand loses its relevance if it's not making any sense to the consumer.
Like Gillette.
It's quite spot on, and I couldn't agree more. The only thing that I'm trying to say is, in case you are saying, Vani, that DEI is an evolving process, 200% there, yes. The question is, every aspect of marketing, every aspect of life is an evolving process.
Absolutely.
Today,
Yes, yeah.
what people are saying today is that the world today knows 17% of the total knowledge of the universe. In my opinion, they don't even know 7. So the question here is that once you know, the more you know, you realize how less you know. So the fact here is that it, like any other field, DEI is also an evolving field, right? But what I took a bit of an, I mean, it triggered me, is that our discussion was going into male-female divide, which can never be the question, in my opinion.
Would you like to give us some examples of what this discussion could have instead been
No, I'll
about?
tell
We'd
you
love
what,
to bring
as
that.
I said before, the marketing is a very, very scientific process, right? And I agree with Mukesh when he says that every person under the sun, I would have used the word every Tom, Dick and Harry, I will not. But the question here is that every person under the sun thinks that he's capable of giving marketing input. The question is, again as I repeat, marketing implementation is not what is the mindset of the head of marketing or the marketing department.
Right.
It is a scientific process. And the information that is being used to take out a campaign is based on a scientific research, which is not to do with 20, 30 people.
Based on many case studies and
Many
market
case
surveys.
studies.
Simple as
Do
that.
you know if you have been in levers, you would be knowing, there are at least 40 to 50 GDs which are done to arrive at issues. Forget about
I'm
name
sure, which is why Unilever
And
is
then-
where it is.
No, and then
Huh.
the issues raised are then quantified by extensive research. So that is the way to do it. And that information which is culled out by these things are used in marketing decisions. It has nothing to do with the lady out there or the man out there who is the head of marketing is a woman or man. It is a scientific process.
No, clearly, sir, we
With all
completely,
respect to your opinion,
yeah.
is there anybody else in the room who would like to bring a different perspective to this? Yes, please.
While I agree with a lot of points that have been discussed on stage, my name is Aubrey from the LorraineMusic.ai, and I respect the gentleman's point of view as well, though very highly, debated. But in a nutshell, let me tell you, there's no clear answer. I think all points are valid. My humble observation, and you've taken Unilever example, let's take, I've been involved with Unilever as well in this journey as an entrepreneur, from the entrepreneurial side. For example, Dove was handled by a lady, brand manager. And believe it or not, the sales guys found it tough to sell it to the distributor. There were men who didn't understand what the product was. They compared it with the soap. It was not a soap. It was a cream. And so they went through the skincare dermatologist route to sell it and then finally found the success that we're seeing today, number one. So therefore, understanding the customer discovery is very important, and that's the brand manager's role. Yeah. And I found that very well being done even by a male brand manager, because having talked about the 100 hours, the male brand manager has to go through the whole process of group focus studies, studying women across cities. And other brand I will tell you, which I handle in J&J, was a female, it was a tampon. And while it's successful in the West, in India, sanitary napkins are used by over 70%. Tampon penetration is just 1.7%. So again, it's a cultural issue. It's a very cultural issue. It all depends on the geography, etc., etc. Sorry, I can talk about ice creams as well, but that's a non-gender issue. I think the point being made is that we've got to discover. Let me tell you one more point. I'm a guy who's into technology. I've been an ex-banker. In banking, we had 65% of staff being ladies. And I'm looking for ladies in two areas, technology and sales. I've spoken to Prabha Narasimhan, ex-Levers, who's now CEO of Colgate. She has the same problem. You see, how many people get into sales as women? They're not encouraged primarily after college. Same thing with technology. You go to the IITs, you go to the engineering.
That's also because the sales environments are not very conducive for women.
Very true, very true.
Where does a woman go and pee? If you're out on a sales pitch, there aren't any adequately clean loos. So the problem is not as simple as just women not applying for jobs.
Vani, I want to take objection to what my friend said. I also use Dove. It may not look like. Yeah, that's the only point I wanted to make. It's getting too heavy. So.
Okay, I have an observation to your point, which you just mentioned. I was handling condoms in the beginning of my career. And look, what you read and what you do is very different things, right? And having worked into these industries and categories, there was time when and I totally relate to what Vani was talking to, when we were doing advertising on condoms, I was just out of college, right? And we were into brand management. While I knew my customer, while I knew my consumers, but then there was no conversation about where is the female into this, what about her pleasure, what about her satisfaction. Today, what you see condom industry, which has traveled to an extent, today you see female pleasure. We introduced female condoms now. So look, this all goes through to a journey of understanding who is the customer, what do they want, is the brand willing to change, innovate towards that customer need, change the behavior, change the advertising, change the product, packaging, everything.
Learning and unlearning.
And learning and unlearning. Then only new product and innovations comes into. But look, from outside, it's very simplified process. But I have gone through that change in retail to just put a simple display into the retail counters in pharma counters. They would refuse to do so. Today you see a long way, you can now go there and you see the products are widely distributed and displayed. So it's a journey. DEI, again, what I would say is it's not about gender. It is not about geography, and it's more about including multiple options and perspectives while you're building brand to take the changing consumer need and changing market environment and include that into the plan. I think that is what Vani
very well said, absolutely. It's not about gender, it's about the diverse perspectives, and which is where diverse perspectives is also about interfunctional perspectives.
And
I mean,
sometimes
how many of
those perspectives are not
Yeah.
relevant. As an organization, as a brand, you should be willing to take it, learn, absorb, and discard what's not relevant and keep building the brand.
Yeah, and maybe just adding to the
Continuous
point
process,
what
yes.
Sir was mentioning, that clearly the head of the department has to be a merit-based selection, not just a gender-based selection. What it brings, I mean, DI, brings the inclusivity. There is a process of collecting the data, but there's also what decision has to be made through the data. Now, typically what happens is that clearly a marketing decision or an advertising decision is done through a deep consumer research. But when those points come in onto your table, if the decision making is like-minded people, 2-3 men sitting, I'm just taking men as an example, it's a placeholder. They will discard couple of smaller nuances or insights which have been very big for the female audience, but maybe they couldn't have understand the sensibility. Like, for example, the condom example she was mentioning. If a brand manager might be only talking to the male users for a condom brand, which would have been a wrong consumer set to do the research on.
Because you will
So
be
those
missing out,
sensibility
yeah.
could have been brought there. Correct, yeah.
Yeah, research being flawed is a marketing problem, and for all marketing problems, please come to me. I will solve all your marketing problems. And on that note, I think we can end this
taken enough
very,
time.
very
Still have a
stimulating,
minute.
scintillating discussion. We have a minute, but we will give that a miss. Thank you, Raj.
I think this timer has been
Unless
reset, so.
anyone else has a very, very interesting, vehement agreement or disagreement, we will leave this discussion at this interesting point. And on that note, I also want to say, I think condoms haven't fundamentally changed, by the way. It's just advertising.
They have
but
changed a lot.
Condom, the product itself hasn't fundamentally changed.
A lot.
Oh my gosh, then I'm buying the wrong kind of condoms. Okay, thank you.
Talk to Neelima.
Thank you, everyone.
Can I request you all to get a picture together, please? Let's get a picture together and stay back on the stage for a bit. We've got some... Mr. Tarun Umad, Managing Director, India, Teats, to kindly help us felicitate the speakers. Yeah, this is where you actually help me out in welcoming the gentleman on the dais with a round of applause. Thank you so much.